Cool. So, yeah, today was another Quadruple Witching Friday, which for those of you who are not familiar with Quadruple Witching, it's the third Friday of, it happens like once every quarter. So essentially, let's see, March, June, September, and December are the months when it happens, and it's like the third Friday in that month. And on that Friday, you have stock futures. So like individual stocks have futures, stock options, index futures, and index options all expire on a Quadruple Witching Friday. So that was today, and it did not let us down at all because the markets were just horrible today. And then there was just a lot of news that came out. So I had to debate whether or not I was going to cover stock information tonight or cover the news. And of course, it's a fundamental session. So I'm like, I'm just going to go over all of the stuff that happened in the news today and over this week. And I'm not sharing my screen yet, but I will. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff that happened today in particular. So let me go back. I'm gonna start sharing my screen so you guys can at least look at something while I'm talking. All right, so it's quite a few things. This is pretty important. If I can pull this tab out, whatever, I'll leave it there. So, Evergrande has a situation going on in China right now that's going to end up being like the Lehman type situation we had here in the United States. They have officially and formally let banks know that they have a loan that's due. Let's see, on Monday. They have a loan that's due on Monday and they're not going to be able to pay it. They just like, look, we're not going to be able to pay this money. And it's like billions of dollars they're not going to be able to pay. So they've had liquidity issues for a little while. I've posted this, I think I may have posted it on my Instagram a couple of days ago, on my Twitter too. But this is like something super important because this group pretty much controls and runs like the housing market. They are like the number one company that has like that carries the most debt in China. So this whole issue is going to really test China's economy on Monday and going forward, because if they can't pay, then like literally what's going to happen to that banking system and to their economy, just because you have all of these creditors that need their money, all these banks, lots of people are going to need their money and they're not going to be able to pay it. What was this? Oh yeah, this is the same article, but it actually like expands it out. It actually talks about the whole market as a whole, and their housing market, their loan market, like the bond market, which is where they carry a lot of their housing stuff. It's like a $19.3 trillion market in China. It's huge. And Evergrande is like right at the center of it. So I'm going to tie that into how that all affects us. Because we have a looming debt ceiling crisis going on here in the United States. I don't know if this site still works. We will see. Oh, wait, hold on. Well, It's very possible for China to be in debt. Actually, China's housing market has been in debt for a long time, like a really long time. They've had issues trying to keep up with their population explosion, trying to build housing. Actually, like if you really look at the heart and like the real like deep down internal workings of the Chinese government, the housing market and their infrastructure sucks bad, like really bad. Like China has a lot of money, but they don't rearrange and restructure money like we do here. Like if your part of the economy is failing, it's failing, but it's your fault. Whereas like, you know, here in the United States, we're not going to let anybody fail. We got to help everybody else. You know, we got to make sure our housing market doesn't fail. We got to make sure our financial market doesn't fail. We have to make sure our retirement funds and accounts and that part of our economy doesn't fail. And the corporations, we got to make sure they don't fail. In China, no. They're like, oh, you failing? You failing by yourself, even though it's all the same economy. Anyway, that's just how they roll in China. But yeah, so this is like the live debt clock. We're about to hit a debt ceiling, and they're still trying to pass this $3.5 trillion bill. So yeah, this just goes to show like in real time, like how much money is being spent in the United States. You know, what the debt is per citizen, per taxpayer. And it's interesting when you look at per citizen versus per taxpayer, how much that number jumps up. So if you're ever just interested in what it's like, the website is usdebtclock.org. So China has issues going on right now. They have like this looming crisis that's going on, and we don't know how big of a crisis it's going to be because China, Russia, North Korea, some parts of the Middle East, we don't really know all their numbers. We don't really know the internal workings. And even whenever we get numbers on the Forex factory calendar, the reason why I don't really focus all that much on them is because you get a lot of manipulated data that come out of Asian markets. That's because they don't want anybody else in the world to know what they have going on, whether they're sinking, swimming, they don't care. They just don't want anybody to know. Russia, the Philippines, there's several other countries in Asia, the small island nations. They just don't want people to know. So they will actually manipulate their data, or they will put out false data just so that you don't know. And how can you manipulate the data? You can add extra days to your recording time. You can take out days. You can make charts scale different. You can, I mean, there's plenty of ways you can manipulate a statistical data point to put out for the people, especially when you don't live there to actually know. And China's been caught doing this before in the past. So while I look at the number, I want to see if it's at, above, or below forecast. I don't actually pay attention to it and just really take it at its face value, just because I know in the back of my mind, like this could be fake. We have Biden's approval ratings dropping. Biden's approval ratings are not all that great because, okay, well, that's one of the reasons why. Wait, it's this one. I have a lot of tabs open, but it's this one when it finally comes up. So, okay, the US military had to admit that, I don't know if you guys heard about it on the news, but there was an airstrike that happened whenever they were trying to get all the Americans and our allies out of Afghanistan. And in the midst of trying to get them out of Afghanistan, they got some intel that there was a Toyota Corolla heading towards the airport and it was full of suicide bombers. So they did a drone strike, hit this car. It was the wrong car. So they ended up killing 10 civilians, 3 adults, and 7 kids. They ended up injuring US soldiers in the process. So yeah, that was just botched. And the US military had to actually come out and admit that part of the reason why they had to admit it was because of the soldiers that got hurt. Like, how are you going to explain to your family that, yeah, I got hurt? How? You know? So Biden's approval rating isn't all that great. And then speaking of his approval rating not being great, we have now candidates coming out saying that they're going to run for 2024. So I told you guys the political cycle never really ends. We have midterms coming up. Then we start the whole campaign process all over again, the nominees and all that stuff. So it never ends. So stuff like this is stuff that's going to come back up again. So I'm showing it to you. It's important because of our relations to the Middle East. It's important because of our relations to our allies, but it's also important because it's going to come back up again in our political cycle and in the campaign cycle. So this isn't going to be the first or the last time that you hear about this. Speaking of political cycle and allies, France has recalled its ambassador to the United States and to Australia because the United States, oh boy. Okay, so to put it in a nutshell for you, France and Australia already had a nuclear deal for some subs. The United States went and approached Australia with a deal, and France is like pissed. France is like, F you, canceling the deal, give us our ambassadors back. So yeah, that's what happened. And now the White House is like, yeah, we'll fix it. Our relationship with France has been up and down, over the history of our relationship, but we'll fix it. And France is like, Also, off of this news, if you go look at the price of uranium, which is what they use as the foundational structure of these nuclear materials, warheads, submarines, it has shot sky high. Like, I mean, sky high. It's super high right now. Uranium hasn't been this high in a long time. But I actually went and looked into who was buying the uranium. It's not France. It's not us. It's not Australia. I could probably ask you guys to type it in the chat and you can probably guess who it is that's buying the uranium. I just think it's funny. At this point in time, we're pissing off all of the wrong people, like literally all of the wrong people. We're pissing off allies. We're pissing off China. We're pissing off the Middle East. Russia's never really been in our corner, even though Trump tried. At this point in time, I'm not all that hopeful and optimistic about tomorrow. And I say that because tomorrow is they're having another protest in Washington because of the first insurrection. They're having another one for justice for those people. So that's why I said tomorrow, because there's supposed to be about 700 people going to Washington for this tomorrow. Anyway, they've blocked off roads, put up fences. And I'm like, you put up a fence, but these people were scaling flat, solid, shiny walls. Like, I don't know. At this point in time, we're in a lot of turmoil, not only here in the United States, but with our allies and with other nations. So speaking of the Middle East, speaking of immigrants, which I had mentioned earlier and talking about getting people out of Afghanistan, the people that they got on planes. So they did bring Afghan citizens who had no affiliation with the United States back on refugee status. If you live in North Carolina, about 5,000 of them are here. About 10,000 are in Texas. About 7,000 are in Florida. They brought thousands of them back. So there is a map. The White House has released, like, you know, a list of which states they actually took the refugees to, and they're calling them refugees. So yeah, they've spread them out across all 50 states. Well, 48 contiguous states. Don't really know about Alaska and Hawaii because I didn't look at that part of the map. I just looked at the continuous part. So the continuous US, they spread them out. There's anywhere from 100 up to about 10,000, you know, in each state. So with that being said, earlier this year, we were having the conversation about Mexican immigrants or just Mexican citizens crossing the border into the United States, and how ICE and, you know, how those at the border were trying to, you know, keep them from coming into the country. Well, there are 13,700 Haitian immigrants right now living under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas. And currently, if you include them in the population of Del Rio, Texas, they make up a third of Del Rio, Texas right now. So they've allowed 13,700 Haitian immigrants to cross into the United States. They are actively watching them cross the river, the Rio Grande River, into Texas, and they just have them under this bridge. So currently, the White House says that they're going to try to get planes to fly these immigrants back to Haiti. But the issue is a lot of them are here from South America, not directly from Haiti. And they went to South America on refugee status because of the turmoil that's going on in Haiti and the political turmoil that's going on, not only natural disasters from like the earthquake they just had and aftermath and some effects of like tropical storms that have gone through the area, but political, because remember, their president was assassinated not too long ago. And so politically, they're still in upheaval. So yeah, I have a smile on my face right now because I'm just like, what the hell are we doing? Like, I feel like at this point in time, the United States should just stop. I don't know. Throw your hands up, turn around, just walk away. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. They let that happen, but they were so strict about Mexican citizens and those from South and Central America coming in, but you just allowed 13,700 Haitians, and you know exactly how many. They said exactly 13,700. This article says more than 12,000, but ICE, I watched an interview with them earlier, they counted them. So anyway, what does all this have to do with anything? Well, first of all, we have to pay attention to China. This whole issue with Evergrande is going to come back, and it's going to have ripple effects, just like Lehman did. If China's economy is strong enough, it can be self-contained. It won't have as much of a ripple effect as Lehman did across the world, because the one good thing about this is that China's financial system isn't directly like interlocked with our economy. Our economy is more or less on the supply and demand side with goods. It's not strictly financial. So if anything with China, if this does have impact, it's going to be because there are banks from the United States that have invested in real estate or have held on to bonds from this company, because remember, companies bulk their bonds and stuff together and bulk their mortgages together and sell pieces of them, as we talked about with the Fed, doing mortgage securities. This is a type of mortgage security. So if our US banks are holding any of their mortgage securities or are holding any of their securities, that puts our banks at risk and at jeopardy for, you know, anything that could happen from the fallout of this stuff. So that's that. Let's see. That article is pretty much the same thing. That was the debt clock. Biden's approval rating. So what does this have to do with anything? Because Biden's our president, so that kind of matters. But then as you get approval ratings that hit like rock bottom or all-time low levels, then you start getting those in Congress to have the conversation about whether or not a president's fit, whether or not they should be in office, whether or not they're actually doing their job, whether or not they're actually serving the people. So those types of conversations can actually come about should things stay low and stay, you know, in an area where the people just aren't happy at all. Situation with the Rio Grande and immigrants that came in from Afghanistan. Well, they're immigrants that come in. So when you have a large influx of immigrants, so this is 13,700 Haitian immigrants in Texas. Then we had an influx of immigrants come in from Afghanistan. So resources get strained. A lot of people will debate that, whether or not it does, but when you think about it, you have a current system that's set up for your citizens. Now you're bringing people in who are new to the system, haven't contributed to the system, but need to get out and get resources from the system. You know, when they budget for ICE, when they budget for all these different programs, you don't necessarily budget for that big of an influx and two all, you know, around the same time. So this is money that's going to have to be printed, redirected, because remember, here in the United States, we redirect money from one program to another in order to cover our bases. So it's money that could be redirected from one program to another to help cover these things. Or it could be something that goes through Congress, or money that gets recalled. So remember, these are nations, two countries where we actually have money built into our budget to send to every year. If you go and search congress.gov and search Haiti, search Afghanistan, you'll see how much money we actively send to these countries every year. So it could be, or could come down to the United States asking those countries for money back or for a percentage back. It's almost like child support. Like you pay the money, you know, when the child's with one parent, but if they're with you, you're like, well, hey, why am I having to pay the money? Because they're with us. So it could be like the United States could say, hey, give us a percentage of that money back because we're having to house and, you know, take care of your citizens here. Or you put them in turmoil, you know, hey, we need something back. So that's that. With France, they're an ally. The hope is that France will be nice and will say, we forgive both of you. However, here is one scenario that could possibly happen, and it could like really and truly happen because they've been known to do it. So China is buying a lot of uranium. They're making a lot of nuclear deals. France is in need of nuclear subs. Like, well, not so much in need of, but how do I put it? To fulfill the deal with Australia, the nuclear subs are needed. So China could swoop in just like they swooped in before Kamala Harris got to Asia, and they could produce, give, or make a deal for the subs the same way that they produced and gave double the amount of vaccines before Kamala Harris could get to Vietnam. So that's a possibility. How much turmoil would that cause? A lot. But at the same time, if France does it with China and China sticks with France, I mean, what are we going to do? Korea is testing nuclear missiles and their nuclear range still. So we wouldn't really do anything. I mean, we could, but that wouldn't be great. Would that be good for France to do? As far as being our ally, no. But anything's possible. Anything's possible when France is mad. History shows us that. So that's just something we're going to watch. Something we're going to watch because they're our ally. So is Australia. And then if things get too heated between us and Australia, that's when the UK is going to step in, because remember, there's still a commonwealth. It's a lot. There's still a commonwealth between Britain, Australia, Canada, some of the Caribbean countries. So we can't ruffle all the feathers all at one time. So hopefully this situation smooths itself over. And then with the drone strike, now that it's been made public that it was a mistake and they've issued this apology, Afghans aren't about killing the innocent. They're not about being wasteful. They're not about they're about peace right now. Like, as much as we like to talk about ISIS and the Taliban, all that stuff, they just really want to be with amongst themselves, do their own thing. And so at the end of the day, that's what they want, and we just need to let them do within reason what they want to do. But this isn't going to sit well. Whether they choose to do something about it right now, I don't think so, but it's something that's still going to stick in their minds. So that's something we just have to remember. Boy, okay, now to the Forex Factory calendar, and I'm not going to spend all day on it because I'm just going to talk about next week. All right, next week is a huge week in the markets. If you don't pay attention to any other week ever for the rest of the year, pay attention to this week because it's September. It's the last month in the third quarter. It's the third week of the third quarter. Technically, next week will be like the fourth week, but it's the last Fed meeting of the quarter. We get the last Fed minutes of the quarter. We get a rate. We get a press conference, and slide to Friday, we get a speech from Jerome Powell. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week are going to be huge, guys. If you look at Thursday, we have all of this news coming out. There's so much news coming out between Wednesday and Friday of next week. Like, next week is just going to be a week where, starting on Wednesday, it's literally observation mode, because this is going to dictate literally the rest of the year. This is going to dictate the rest of the year and like the first, maybe second quarter of next year, because the minutes that come out next week are going to be the last minutes that we get prior to the government setting the budget for the next fiscal year. So next week is when we really, really have to pay attention. And the markets are not really feeling Jerome Powell right now. He's got his seat. Everybody's all excited. Well, they are all excited, but the markets are not feeling him right now. Like, anytime, if you look, anytime he has spoken, anytime a Fed official has spoken, it could have been something we already knew. The markets immediately reacted negatively to a Fed official being on the news. Like, I went back and looked at the last 6 weeks when we've had anybody just talk about anything, anywhere. The markets immediately responded negatively, even though the market might have rebounded. The market just wasn't excited because there's so much tension in the air every time we get a Fed official on because of this news that's coming out right here because of this. So we definitely have to pay attention to this news right here. Like, I kid you not, they say that September is the worst trading month of the year because of this news. I promise you. Like, and it's not to scare you, it's literally just to inform you and to get you to understand like why the markets behave and do what they do. The markets hate uncertainty. This news is going to bring the most uncertainty we've had all year because we've already heard the Fed say that they were going to taper. They've started tapering in the background, but they haven't started tapering in the foreground. What does that mean? They've started tapering overnight stuff we don't see, stuff that doesn't really affect us. It affects banks. The stuff in the foreground, the stuff that we see is interest rates. The stuff that we see is the things that impact prices every day, the jobs, the inflation, the interest rates, like influences upon taxes, that type of stuff. That's the type of stuff that the market is waiting for. When the Fed said they were going to start tapering, technically they had already started tapering. They literally started tapering the minute that came out. They started cutting the overnight spending. These economic projections, that's what everybody's going to be looking at first. We want to know how the Fed is viewing our economy. What am I going to look for? I'm going to look for, is the Fed really going to tell us what the true gross inflation rate is right now? Because it's way over their projection, like way over. We're at like 5.3%. We're way over where they thought we were going to be for this time of the year. So I want to see, are they really going to say that? Are they really going to say where we are now? And are they really and truly going to put out where we're going to be? Because they have to account for the fact that China is not shipping to us the way that they used to. They have to account for the fact that a third of the cargo shipments that come into and out of California aren't full and aren't what they used to be. They also have to account for the fact that our corporations, in order to receive items here in the United States, are taking a hit. And if they aren't taking a hit, they have to pass that on to the customer. So when a cargo container used to be $7,000 to ship across the ocean, is now $33,000. Somebody has to eat that cost. Is the Fed going to talk about that? Because that's why prices are the way that they are. That's why the job market is the way that it is. Like, that has to be talked about. And is that going to be reflected in these economic projections? The Fed statement, of course, that's important. The rate, yes, that's important. Next important thing after the projections, though, for me, is this press conference, because that is where you're going to get raw answers. They are going to be allowed to ask him questions that have not been presented. I want to hear what they're going to ask, and I want to hear how he responds. The market is not going to be happy, literally, solely because the news is coming out. Solely because the news is coming out, I already know that leading up to this news, the market's going to be very, very somber. It's going to trade flat or negative until he starts talking. Until we actually get all of this data that comes out, the negatives, like the market's going to trade very, very flat or slightly negative until we get this news that comes out. Then on Thursday, depending on what happens on Wednesday, that determines how New York is going to trade. Sorry, this news right here for unemployment claims and the flash data, because flash data could be great. But if this news up here wasn't great, the market's still going to be like, whatever. And then we have a ton, like you see all these red and orange folders for the European market coming out. We have news from the Swiss franc that's coming out. We rarely get news from them. They're going to set the precedent for how Europe trades the rest of this news, because they're the safe haven. They're the people who Europe's kind of looking to for guidance, for money, those types of things. Then we also get asset purchases, we get the votes and all that stuff from the GBP. That's going to be a whole big news segment all in and of itself. Unemployment claims is going to be important coming off of the Fed news. However, we will possibly get some of this unemployment news in the Fed news up here. So it's not going to be that much of a surprise, because technically this hint of how the news actually comes out. So the Fed and the president, they already have this news the day before. The cutoff date for when the actual unemployment report and the press release is supposed to be written will be right around the time when all this news is coming out. So it wouldn't surprise me if somebody might ask him about the employment situation, and he might kind of allude to what the news is going to be on Thursday. So if you listen and he starts talking about jobs and the employment situation, he'll probably just go ahead and tell you what the employment news will trend towards on Thursday. Then Jerome Powell's just flat out speaking on Friday. This happens every September. So we'll get, the press conference where he talks, then the following Friday, he talks again. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week is why they call September what they call it. It's coming off of a triple witching Friday, which it always happens that way, which just makes trading the second half of September hell. Like, it just makes it hell. But it's good for information, super good for information, super good for finding out what your long-term plays are supposed to be like, or it helps you kind of steer yourself into the correct lane for long-term trades. It's not good for short-term stuff at all. But long-term plays, yeah, you'll get your direction for long-term plays by the end of the market on Friday after he speaks for the second time. Don't discount either Fed member Williams, because depending on how they vote, if Williams votes against anything that they talked about with the Fed, then that's going to be really important to listen to Fed member Williams talk. And so then the week after that, we'll just get a bunch of Fed officials speaking, giving their opinion about the news that came out and about their vote and stuff. So that is that. My mouth is really dry. I want to stop talking now. If I think of anything else, I'll drop it in the group chat. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Level so he can go over the technical review for the week. I saw that there were people who dropped stuff in the chat. I'll just answer it, or we can talk about it once he's done.
Cool beans. Great job as always, Coleman. We appreciate you and all the great sauce that you bring us every weeknight. Appreciate it. All right, can y'all see my screen? Type if you can. Type Y for yes, please. Sweet. All right, cool deal. So, told you guys Wednesday night that we had to see if the dollar held the level that it was at Wednesday night, which was, what was it, the 15th, right? So we was right here. Told you guys that we needed to see if the dollar held this level. And if it held this level, then I wanted to see it push back up. If not, then I wanted to see it push back down to the downside and potentially test these levels down here. Well, we see what happened. Dollar did indeed hold that level. This is 20 o'clock is 8 o'clock hour for us. 21 o'clock is 9 o'clock hour, of course. So we was right here, right in here. We see price held and popped up, gave us an aggressive push through those levels, came back and retested it perfectly, didn't it? Absolutely did. And when it came back and retested it, it popped up to the upside to retest this previous high that I wanted to see it retest. And now next week we'll see if it keep pushing up to retest the next target. So with that being said, let's look at our currency pairs. And let me let whoever knocking at the door in. 1 second. All right, so knowing that our dollar index did what it did, let's go back to Monday night. Here we go. I mean Wednesday night. Here we go. So we see price held that level, and so we know what we're looking for once price hold this resistance and doesn't break above it. We know that we expect price to do what? Come back down, retest our previous lows. It does for come down like I told you guys and retest our level down here at this imbalance. We see that's exactly what happened. Let's look at GBP USD, same difference. Held the level, pushed down to retest previous lows. We can keep this thing very simple, y'all. We advanced now. Um, same difference. Monday night. This was a good sell off. I mean Wednesday night here. We had just hit this level. NZD was our perfect example Wednesday night. If you remember, we came up, retested this level that I had marked perfectly for the sell off. I told you guys if we held this level Wednesday night, that we would come on back down, retest previous low here, which we see we got that here, and potentially come on down to refill in this imbalance right here and retest this structure. We see that we damn near got there. So that was a great sale. Great setup. Looking at silver, same difference. Great trade. Looking at gold, same difference. Great trade. Looking at oil, I told you guys that I wanted to see oil continue to push up. And we see that we did get oil to continue to push up this week. I want to see this previous high retested. We hadn't got there yet. We pushed up and now we're back at the structure. So we see how markets open up for the new trading week with that. Euro USD, perfect. Great setup. At this time, I'll stop the recording and take any questions.